I'm gonna talk about the Mafia games. I'm gonna talk about the Mafia. That's how we start this. That's how the first video essay goes. It's the Last year, Mafia Definitive Edition was released, and it got me to finally play every game in the Mafia series, and I have a lot of feelings on it. This Definitive Edition of the first game became known to me mostly because of how impressive of a technological feat it is. The entire draw of the remake is that it's this intriguing story, now being given the medium's best treatment, letting it flesh out into the story it always could have been. Besides the obvious changes to the engine and the complete overhaul of the graphics, the dialogue was also rewritten to add more ambiguity and nuance, and that really shines through.
That's right. Well, if you're looking to set up a gravy train, you called the wrong cop. I'm not looking for any, associates.
Good. Because I'm on the nut. Can't even pay for the coffee. But I got plenty to trade.
Well, let's hear it.
How long you been in town?
3 years. Caught my teeth in Empire Bay.
Well, they handed you the Morello case. Right out of the gate.
That's what the paper says, ain't it? And what's it to you?
Tough break. Case must be getting pretty cold by now.
Or you got something might warm it up?
Yeah, I might have something.
And what's my end of the deal? You want money? Some sort of immunity?
None of that. I got people I need to protect.
The game comes off as a fully realized version of a story that has become so optimized that it's engaging almost all the way through. The existence of this Definitive Edition is a technical achievement that deserves all the praise it's received and more. I had an incredible time in New Heaven and was instantly attached to every character I was introduced to, no matter how much of a cheesy stereotype they tended to be. Mafia Definitive Edition was a really good time. I loved the story and I watched every cutscene, and I was never tempted to skip any of the new dialogue. I really like the rewrites the developers did because it makes a scene like the accidental car bombing much more horrific. Like you kind of would expect something like that situation to be.
Christ. No, no, no! Hey, stop! Damn, that's one hot dame.
Yeah, I'll be home before supper. Hey, you want to go dancing this weekend? Maybe drop the kid off at your pop's place. Yeah, I'm still here. Oh, Christ. Hey! Stop! No, no, no.
Oh, God! Tommy, what's going on?
Pick up. Vinny. It all went bad.
It's a dramatic improvement over the original version. This new release of Mafia consumed my life for 4 nights, and I was excited to boot up the game and see what it had in store for me every single night. I loved it so much that the moment the credits stopped rolling, I immediately installed Mafia 2 Definitive Edition. If the first game was giving me a main character as interesting and layered as Tommy Angelo, surely the subsequent games would make protagonists that I would love even more. And then I played Mafia 2. And I did not like it very much.
You remember the wise guys we used to see when we was kids?
Yeah, why?
The guy we're meeting here is one of them. I think he's got something big for us.
Boom, 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 boom. You pull this off, I won't forget it.
Trust me.
I'm gonna shoot you right down. Right off of your feet.
Not too many guys got the stomach for this line of work.
I'd like to preface this discussion with a bit of a disclaimer. My view on this game in comparison to the first is drastically different than the reality of how these games were made. Mafia 2 was released in 2009, and this new remake of the first game just came out in 2020. It's not exactly fair to the second game in that way, but I do truly believe that the narrative problems in the sequel warrant this type of discussion. At least they bothered me enough to want to make this video. Mafia 2 is an interesting beast to tackle, and my opinions on it are the main reason I decided to make this video in the first place. I've struggled to put a theme on this video, or essay, or video essay, or whatever the hell you call it, because the writer in me wants this whole ramble to have some sort of pretty bow on top that ties it all together, but honestly, I just kind of wanted to dog on this critically and commercially lauded game because I have found very little negative said about it online. The first game is a localized, isolated story that functions on its own, but Mafia 2 is a different thing entirely. It feels like the story had to be stretched out across a longer playing time, because playing time always means better quality, right? On every front, Mafia 2 falls short of the sky-high expectations I had off the back of the first game. I'll start with the protagonists, because I think this will be my hottest take of the video, I guess. Vito Scaletta is a massive downgrade from Tommy Angelo in every way. Don't get me wrong, I don't think Vito is a bad character. No, yeah, I do. I do think he's a bad character, but the point is, Vito lacks every bit of depth that Tommy possessed, and what made him such an interesting character to take control of. Tommy is thrust into a life of crime on a whim in some petty pursuit of revenge. Throughout the game, he encounters situations that make him second-guess his decisions over and over again until finally he breaks. He turns on the crime family he's grown to love, ratting on the Don in exchange for his own family's freedom. And unbelievably, it works for a really long time. That is, until the game's final scene.
Mr. Angelo. Yes. Mr. Salieri sends his regards.
Tommy!
That's okay. You're safe now. We're all safe. Remember that money, jobs, even best pals will come and go. But family is forever.
The moment leaves this bittersweet taste in the player's mouth. It's like the writers are slapping us in the face for ever believing they'd end this kind of game with such a nice, calm ending and hand us a card that says, "I love you, pumpkin, your favorite character's doing just fine." We rooted so much for Tommy because as people who understand that what he does is wrong, we saw his escape from the life as a redemption arc. Tommy's not some cold-blooded killer, he's a working-class guy that just so happened to know how to handle a gun. Deep down, he knows what he's doing is wrong, and it's characters like this that make the best protagonists. Tommy Angelo wrestles with inner demons and struggles to maintain a balance between the two worlds he's found himself wedged between. Yes, it's a common trope for the handsome 30-something-year-old white man to wrestle with this exact concept, but it's still done in a way that is endearing and interesting to watch. Tommy usually does the right thing when given a clear-cut choice, and these choices are what make us like him so much more. Vito Scaletta is a piece of paper with the word Mafia guy written on it. He deals with almost no internal struggles and exists merely to expose us to cool Mafia things, I guess. Like selling junker cars or crashing boats. I don't know. I've forgotten most of this plot already. The story of Mafia 2 is very, very complicated, usually too much so, and Vito is just as along for the ride as we are. One of the biggest things that stood out to me was the transition from Vito's time in jail to his immediate actions once he's released. Early in the game, you get to run a gas scam with Vito, and at this point in the game, later on, Vito gets caught for running that scam, and he has to spend I don't know, less than a year in prison. It's like some matter of months. One shining light is there to make us think there's a better way to go about all this, and that's the character Leo Galante. Leo is a Mafia man of honor, standing for a set of principles and maintaining these principles in his work, however dark it may get. As I got through the jail sequence, I was so hopeful that maybe, just maybe, the story would finally get some teeth and let Vito deal with some sort of decision. Will he keep pulling tricks for petty cash, or will he look for a way into a more organized, stable, and honorable way of living? As far as moral choices go, it's pretty weak, but at this point I was desperate for some sort of emotional conflict and was hoping for anything. Leo talks to Vito about the different crime families, and he makes it very clear what he values and who he thinks runs their rackets the best and who runs their rackets the worst. Vito seems receptive to this, and when you finally get out of prison very early thanks to Leo, you'd think Vito would try something different and go about his life as a changed man, learning from his experience in prison and not necessarily leaving the life, but at least going about it in a smarter way. Nah, he goes straight to the guy Leo talked about and does grunt work for a while to get a place in the family. And yeah, he goes to them because Joe is working with them, but that's kind of the point. I'm playing as a pancake. I think I understand narratively why this is done, but the story offers no other reason for this other than Vito's mom dying while he's locked up. This is the moment we're supposed to believe that he has broken, and all he knows to do is rejoin the life of crime and live to make money. I get that, but God, is it handled poorly. Yes, he lost his last little bit of family in a way. I mean, his sister's still around, but is that the only thing we're supposed to take from this prison section? That Vito got locked up and lost everything, so now he has to go back to the things that got him locked up in the first place? I just don't buy it narratively, and it strikes a wrong chord with me. The induction ceremony for Vito and Joe feels so rushed and meaningless because we know now, thanks to Leo, that this family is very obviously not one that Vito should trust. The entire prison sequence now feels pointless because all that really happened to there of substance was Vito's mom died and I learned a new combo move. Vito doesn't change. He just gets out, grabs onto Joe's coattails, and lets it take him wherever he goes. On another note, Vito's also a war vet that deals with no repercussions from the war. He gets back to town and immediately goes like gun shopping, killing people, you know. I'm not saying every war hero story needs to deal with mental trauma, but it's just another missed opportunity to get us at least a little bit emotionally invested in our protagonist. Yes, Mafia 2 has more guns, more cars, a better engine, and all that other good stuff, but it upgrades all these aspects instead of telling a story with any nuance whatsoever, something the first game did very well, even in the classic version. In terms of Mafia 2's gameplay, there's not much to write home about. The biggest issue it has is the same issue all the other games have. There is way too much driving. If your game relies so heavily on scene after scene of long drives full of dialogue, you at least have to make the driving mechanics enjoyable. Rockstar has really mastered the art of an immersive car conversation, or carversation, if you will, and comparing the two is almost laughable. Across my entire time with Mafia 2, I believe I got a carversation done maybe 3 times without crashing the vehicle and triggering the clever yet clunky dialogue that the game puts in to remind you that you're doing poorly and interrupting some trains of thought within the vehicle by crashing all the time. Don't get me wrong, I like when stuff like this is done with driving-centric games, but it still doesn't get past the fact that the driving itself is thoroughly unenjoyable here. On PC, it is clunky, slow, and in general, not a good time. And that's my biggest gripe with the series. The constant driving and just dying to get through the drive so you can get to the interesting scenes. I wish there were an option like in LA Noire where you can get your partner to drive for you and it will give you all the dialogue in cutscene style, where previously you would have had to stick through the terrible driving yourself and then an additional few miles of driving after the dialogue was finished. This may be just me and my experience with the game on PC, but it was a big part of my displeasure with the game, so I had to include it. There's one more thing about Mafia 2 that I'd like to harp on for another minute, and that's the ending. Throughout the game, the one constant of the story has been Joe Barbaro. He's a genuinely great side character, and he fills the role of blood brother to Vito really well. He's the whole reason Vito gets into the life in the first place, and he's the reason Vito stays and climbs the ranks. In truth, Joe is more of a protagonist than Vito, because he's the only one who deals with any sort of important decision, and even that's at the very ending of the game. On top of that, it is the least believable twist I have seen in a while. Out of nowhere, Joe just shows up with a gun to Vito's head. And the moment lasts all of half a second before it's back to business as usual, and he's like, oh, he gave me a deal, and it's, but I couldn't take it. It's just a super lazy attempt at a last-minute gut punch, and it fails in every way. Regardless, there is one part of the sequence that I do kind of like.
He wanted me to whack it. Said he'd make me a capo, give me my own crew. You know, pretty much everything I ever wanted.
Yeah? So why the hell didn't you do it?
Remember that $5 you owe me?
Other than that line, this part of the ending is pretty horrific. After this piss-poor attempt at a twist, we're given another one just 2 minutes later when Leo picks both of the boys up after they've killed the big baddie. Previously, Vito had done a deal with Leo that got them to where they are, getting them in the place to kill the big baddie, but in a move I honestly was surprised by, Leo has the car that's transporting Joe take a turn down a different street, and he leaves Vito's sight. Leo says Joe wasn't part of the deal. And the game has the balls to end on that line. I was mostly just annoyed with the story at this point, but this moment really hit me like, wow, they're really gonna end it right there. I mean, the whole time I'm sitting through these credits, I'm just completely reevaluating how I feel about the character of Leo and like what a crazy thing this could be depending on what he did to him. I mean, oh my god, I can't wait to see how they explore that. And I don't want to think about that. I don't want to think about that. No. Back to Mafia 2. Do I think that Mafia 2 Definitive Edition is a bad video game? No. I think it's okay. But good lord, is it the most disappointing piece of media I have consumed in quite some time. After the first game, I was ready for even more layered characters and fun, albeit somewhat predictable, twists. What I got was a GTA clone that kept insisting to me that it was a deep story with cool Mafia things, but it was just driving and then shooting Tommy guns. I won't even get into Henry's death, because that seemed to be the one thing a bunch of players latched onto as being profoundly sad, when I found it really drawn out and saw pretty clearly that they were about to use this tertiary character to add a shock value death into the middle of the game in a way that just didn't work for me. Nonetheless, I have to keep reiterating that Mafia 2 is not a bad game. It is what it is. And that is the phrase the developers took and ran with when it came to Mafia 3.
You tell him I'm on my way. But nobody. Tell him I'm on my way. I keep my mind on my money. I keep my hand on my gunny. Don't get to playing with Sonny unless you play Boy Bunny. I put bow in your tummy, tattoo in your brain. See, the man ain't playing if you think it's a game. Haters whisper my name. Suckers want what I slang. Arrogant and I'm vain. DA want me to hang. But let me explain. Like Abel and Cain, that the black grim reaper is not my brother's keeper. Revenge, a killer's on a binge of revenge. It depends if I can live with my sins. Lose family and friends. Lost them all. Now you got to lose life and limbs. Spit phlegm on them. Got the code to rock him. Homie jokes ain't.
Mafia 3 is fun as hell. I'm not even going to build up to it. It is so much fun. It is the first thing I have to say. This game is so much fun. From the very beginning, it's clear that we are about to be treated to what is a fairly standard action game, but it is all hammed up with the best 8 songs from the 60s on repeat. And you got Super Soldier punching, and you shooting, and you stabbing, and you pow, 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 pow. It's a good time. Mafia 3 goes the route of just trying to create an enjoyable video game. For the most part, the cutscenes are not overly long, and the actors are doing a great job of keeping the pace moving at a constant jog at least. Honestly, this is probably the game I liked the greatest number of side characters in a while. Donovan is great, and his post-credits scene is hilarious, even if it may not have been intended to be such.
Senator! Where were you when John Fitzgerald Kennedy was assassinated?
I don't remember. At home, I believe. I don't remember. At home, I believe. Thank you, Mr. Donovan. I believe that.
Sit down and shut the up! Well, I knew right then and there that I couldn't let that stand. That I would find a way to make it right no matter how long it took.
What are you saying?
I'm saying that Sal Marcano and a group of conspirators murdered Jack Kennedy.
Oh, that is the most absurd thing I have ever heard.
I assumed you would say that.
It leans so far into the cheesiness of the previous games that at times it kind of comes off as a satire. In general, I really like the story structure of Mafia 3, if for no other reason than it is simple and dumb. You take over Lincoln Clay, a man who comes back from war and wants nothing else but to hang out with his friends and protect his surrogate family. Then, it's all taken away from him as the Italian Mafia stabs his father figure in the back and shoots Lincoln right in the head. Lincoln wakes up having miraculously survived. He figures his stuff out and vows to kill every last member of the Mafia. It's a believable setup, simply because of the almost certain brain damage Lincoln has suffered from this. I mean, that's a pretty nasty scar. That had to have done something. Guy got shot in the face. Even if that's not the canonical reason, it's my headcanon because it lets me suspend some disbelief and just go with how stupidly fun this game is. It really is dumb, and boy is it violent. You feel like a roided up jock playing this game. I almost felt like I was playing some sort of fan fiction based loosely on the first 2 games. Mostly because the only connection we have to the previous titles for most of the game are the mere existence of the Italian Mafia and the return of Vito as one of your district leaders. Side note, I actually really like the way the districts work in this game. It's cool to see the amount of leeway that was made so that a lot of different endings could be achieved, and there are character deaths you'd never see if you were just fair to everyone you work with, like I was the first time I played through. If you give all your districts to Vito, like a lot of fans of the games did, then the other 2 bosses will leave, and you have to go kill them because they know too much and will start causing trouble. I really like this addition because while it isn't baked into the main story, it's a possibility that you can explore if you feel so inclined. It isn't some system where being a dick means nothing to people around you and you get the same ending every time. There are real, actual consequences for being a piece of shit, which I really liked. Back to the point at hand though, all in all, I think Mafia 3 serves as a really nice send-off for the series, if that's what it's going to be. For the first 2 games, you're introduced to this underworld and you're shown all the awful things about it, and then in the final game, you take control of somebody that you probably would have wronged in the previous games, and you tear it all down like a total action movie hero. It's a good time, even if it's pretty dumb. While I did enjoy most of my time playing the game though, there is one thing I could not forgive them for doing. And it's this.
Best of luck to you, son.
Yes, after all this time, it is finally revealed that Joe was alive and working for Leo Galante the whole time. Look, I'll be entirely honest with you. I think like most people, I did do kind of a little jump for joy when I saw Joe. I saw him in the background. I was like, I know that man. I know that man. But then, that's it. We see his face. He doesn't speak. He just gives a knowing look to Lincoln like they fucking know each other or something. They don't. It's like the laziest attempt at closure ever. Of all the ways to approach this moment, after all the setup you did at the end of the last game, this moment is all we get. It isn't fully explained, but as far as we can tell, Joe and Vito never spoke after that fateful car ride. Actually, one of Vito's missions sounds vaguely like he believes Joe was murdered. Look, you've done all this work to create the only meaningful relationship in the second game, and this is how it's treated in the third. Joe stays loyal, and what he gets is never seeing his best friend again, and remaining in servitude to Leo? That's how it comes off to me, at least. And look, I'm all for melodramatic or not-so-simple endings, but this just feels lazy. I honestly would have preferred if we'd never seen Joe again. Then I could at least give the developers credit for letting the player imagine what happened. Yes, it's nice to see him again, but in the final 10 minutes of the game? And he doesn't even say anything? I've played the previous game and then spent another 50 hours going through all this game's side missions, doing the same thing over and over and over again to take over these districts, and the final payoff for the epic ending of the second game is, oh nah, he's not dead, he's all good. That's it. The amount of ways Joe could have been incorporated into a story as basic as this is so vast that it's almost shocking that this was the way they chose to handle it. Joe's only characteristic was that he was Vito's best friend, but here at the end, our only bit of closure is just simply knowing he's alive. Joe's likable, sure, but just seeing his face and finding out he never died is not a satisfying conclusion to his story. What the hell does he even do for Leo? Just walk behind him? Step out of cars while Leo has conversations and just sit behind him looking dopey? I can't imagine he holds much power beside Leo because it's pretty well established he's kind of a dumbass. It's so disappointing, as much of my discussion of the latter two games has been thus far. Besides this ending though, Mafia 3 is a great time. Lincoln is a good fit for such a violent entry to the series, and the dismantling of the Italian Mafia is a pretty satisfying thing to do, even if the gameplay loop can get stale after a while. It's fun. Play it if you want to. I liked it. Joey Diaz is in it. Nolan North plays a radio host / KKK leader. It's a good time. The Mafia series is one I really have grown to love despite all the issues I've found with it in this video. In today's media-based culture, we really do find most flaws in the things we love because they're the things we spent the most time on and paid the most attention to. I've been thinking about these games so much these past few weeks, and I had so many thoughts on my experience that I decided to finally make my own video essay. I wrote this entire script in a manic episode in 8 hours, in an afternoon and an evening, and I think I'm actually pretty happy with the writing. Not to toot my own horn or anything, maybe I'm losing it, maybe this is as interesting as I believe it is, who knows. I just know that this was a fun thing to write, and I hope somebody gets some enjoyment out of my ramblings. Thanks for watching.